Hi, welcome to this Choose to Challenge panel discussion. Today we are talking all about gender balance and, more importantly, about the strategies that you can use to choose to challenge in your own organisations. So once again, I'm joined by Ronke Babajide, who is a senior solutions engineer at VMware. She's also the host of the Women in Tech Spotlight podcast series. If you haven't checked that out, you should do. I will post the link underneath this video, and don't forget to follow Ronke on LinkedIn, where you'll get updates every week about the new episode. And also Ursula Jobst, who is a program manager at A1 Telecoms. She's also incredibly passionate about gender equality and diversity. And this week we are joined with Amanda Beedham, who is a fantastic senior data scientist at RSA. She is a member of the Gender Balance Committee at RSA. She's also founded girls coding clubs and hackathons, and is incredibly passionate about getting more girls into the data scene. She's also been on a leadership journey herself, and so a fantastic role model to lots of girls. Amanda, welcome this evening, and it would be fantastic if you would share with us what is it that makes you so passionate about this subject?
Oh, thanks, Sue. I think the first thing to say is that I've been, building models using data and statistics for a number of years, but more recently I've moved over to data science, which means coding in open source languages like R and Python. And as I've made that move, I've noticed that there are very few women who do what I do, very few women actually learning to code. And what I've been doing is going to various diversity meetups and talking to other people in the profession. And I've learned that there's just not that many girls who are learning to code. It seems to have a bit of an image problem. I think the girls think that it's just for boys who like playing video games and hacking into the Pentagon. So that's what's spurred me on to join a local code club at a state girls' school and teach girls to code and kind of role model that there are actually women in my profession. And this year I've joined the Gender Balance Committee at work, where I advocate for women in male-dominated roles. And I'm currently setting up a Women in STEM group at a network at work to support women in technology. So yes, it's a real key priority for me.
Thank you. And really leading on from that, what are the main issues that you see with gender equality, gender balance?
Yeah, so I'll bring sort of 3 points, and I guess the first thing is what I've said about the lack of female talent pipeline. So girls, as I said, they're not learning to code. That there is this image problem with coding, and if you look at GCSE computer science, it has one of the biggest gender gaps of all the subjects at GCSE. So just a statistic here: in 2020, only 21% of those taking the exam were female, and as coding is one of the fastest growing and fastest paying career paths, we really need to get girls learning to code and fix that image problem. The second point I was going to raise was around once you're in your tech job, who's getting promoted? And I've just read a really interesting book by Dr. Thomas Chamorro Premusic, and it's called Why Do So Many Incompetent Men Become Leaders and How to Fix It. It's a really interesting read. And what he talks about is the fact that when we look at who we're going to promote into leadership, we look for confidence and charisma. We think that those are the key things that we need in a leader. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean that a leader is going to be any good. And it also means that it's going to favour men, because typically men tend to be more confident and more charismatic. So he argues actually what we need to do is to get, look for competence rather than confidence, and we'll get more women into leadership. And the last point I want to say is around complacency. And recently there's been a survey by King's College London to ask whether we solve the gender inequality. And of those surveyed, only 23% considered that gender inequality was a top concern. And the really sad fact is that out of the 28 countries involved, Britain and Hungary got the lowest score. So we know that the gender parity is not fixed. So we need to look at that.
Absolutely. I mean, that book that you mentioned there, I will share it in the comments underneath this video for anybody who wants to check that out. It's very similar to another book that I was going to reference today by Suzanne Doyle Morris, called The Con Job, where it's all about talking about this difference between competence and confidence, and that we confuse and think that leaders need to have an element of confidence, when the reality is what we should be looking for is like you say, that competence level. It's fine doing the talk, but what we actually need are people who can do the actions. And as you say, that, that is a big issue, is that we're focusing on the wrong skills just because you've got this bravado, and women traditionally are frowned upon, aren't they, for being sort of bigging themselves up. We don't. We play down. We explain that anything that we've achieved is because of luck or because of somebody's help. We rarely acknowledge the hard work and grit that we've put in our own competence levels, and that's as much as to do with anything is about the expectations of women, isn't it, rather than their competence, as you quite rightly say. So we'll share both of those books under this video, but it'd be fantastic to know, Ronke, perhaps what issues you've seen in your experience as well.
Yes, thank you, Sue. I think that Amanda already made a couple of very, very good points. There's little to add to that, actually. So what we see when we're looking for women to work in our companies is that there actually isn't that much female talent out there. And one of the issues I try to address on a daily basis is the fact that a lot of women don't actually know what we do in IT. So this is, I think that there are so many different issues that accumulate in this problem, but one of them is that a lot of people, not only women, actually have no clue what working in IT actually means. We have already touched a little bit on that. The young guy sitting in the cellar in front of his computer hacking into the Pentagon. That's kind of the stereotype of a person working in IT. And I went to meetings where everybody was constantly talking about, yeah, we need more girls to go into IT. We need more women in IT, and I just realized that even my mother doesn't know what I'm doing. So how can we interest women into going into this field? And so what I have started doing is trying to get this pictures of the roles of the women who do these jobs out there, to make more women feel comfortable in also going down that path. So this is definitely an additional issue that I see, the lack of role models and representation when you want to choose this field. Of course, all the other points that Amanda has already made are also there. And also some of the stuff that you said, Susan, would have been something I would have added. But yeah, I would be interested in understanding what Ursula thinks are issues, for example, that she encountered.
Thanks, Ronke. But maybe I would like to first refer to the first point, Amanda. You said that we need to bring more girls to coding, because this is one interesting aspect. I thought right now about it, and I don't think that we need to bring more girls into code academies or IT. I think we need to bring the coding to the girls, yeah, or to the topics they are actually interested, yeah. I remember my story. So back in the days when I started communication studies, we did all our statistics with SPSS from IBM, yeah. So, but this was the top notch, yeah, back in the days. And right now, when I came back doing my master's, yeah, I realized, okay, there is a lot going on with R and Python and how you can access the Twitter API and whatsoever. So there is a huge topic around social science and combine it with coding on how to access this open source data, yeah, to analyze this. And for example, in communication science, there is a high share of female students, yeah. And I think maybe we can, or this should be the focus, to bring the code to the girls, yeah, and not the girls to the code. This is one good development right now, at least in the research field, yeah. And the issues, yeah, or the big, or the, yeah, what are the big issues right now? What I see in my company are that we do have this grassroots movement where people really engage and are courageously talking about the diverse backgrounds, and they work for the topics. They have super cool ideas. But, and on the one hand, and on the other hand, we have the top management only, yeah, showing, not only, yeah, but mostly showing one role model, and you get sometimes the impression that it is kind of a feel-good topic. So from time to time we talk about it, yeah, but we do not really implement actions and measures. So when it comes to quotas, yeah, and we will talk about it later on, I guess, people are, step back, think about it again, and maybe we talk about it next year, yeah. And so this is, I think, one big issue, yeah. This how to build the bridge, yeah, from the grassroots movement to the top management, how to co-create solutions, yeah. And maybe because Amanda, you are part of the gender balance committee. So I'm interested in what's the purpose here, yeah, and is this somehow building the bridge between top management and the grassroots movement?
Yeah, I think that's what we're trying to do. We have a number of different employee resource groups at work that are aimed at sort of promoting diversity and making people's work-life balance better. So I'm part of the Gender Balance Committee. It's a group of sort of 6 or 7 individuals. We have an executive sponsor who's a female, but the rest of us are a mixture of different levels in the company. We also have a male co-chair, so it's not just women involved. We also have a couple of other employee resource groups. We have an LGBTQ group and a group for ethnic minorities. And we also have an RSA Families ERG as well, which is trying to promote a better work-life balance and supporting working parents. And I guess because each of these groups has an executive sponsor and it's made up of people throughout the company, that's how we're trying to reach out to all levels of the company and to to reach out. And I think in regards to the sort of women and the gender movement, I think having males involved as well is really key.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll move on now to Ronke. So we'll talk more about these strategies, because it sounds like you've got a really good structure in place, and it'd be really great to sort of talk about what it is that we would recommend that people try in their own organizations. Ronke, do you want to
Yeah, I wanted to add to what Ursula and what Amanda said around the involvement of management in these strategies, because what I saw very clearly in the past years while I was working at VMware, that it does need a clear strategy from the top management to further this agenda. So especially at VMware, we have initiatives and male allies. That's something that Amanda mentioned as well. We have the support of top management around, we have quotas, for example. Every hiring manager actually has to look at female talent. And I do feel, because there's of course a lot of these other initiatives that Amanda also talked about. We have different pods, we call it pods in VMware. There's the women's pod, there's the Black at VMware pod, there's the Latino at VMware pod. We have LGBTQ at VMware, of course, and all these different initiatives. But what it does need for actual change to happen is not just the people at the base trying to make the world better, which is a very, very important thing, because then in the end, when it comes to day-to-day living, it's the people at the base that actually need to live these values that are given to them from above. But it does need to have a management focus, because when it then comes push to shove, when it's about numbers and sales and everything, there has to be a very clear rule that this is still important, even if it might cost a little bit of money at this certain point. So maybe you will have to wait a month longer to hire a candidate because you have to fulfill this quota first. But which under normal circumstances, if there's no management support, might just lead to just hiring another man instead of waiting that month for the woman because you just want to move on. So yeah. Sure. Around the strategies, I do totally feel that it does need management buy-in, and it does clearly need support from above to get something moving. And one of the agendas we have at VMware is the Agenda 2030. It's an initiative about inclusion, equity, trust, and also sustainability. So this is also a thing that I think ties into the whole good work atmosphere. But one of the things on the agenda is actually having creative, how can I say, to actively close the gender pay gap? Because I think one of the issues we're also still seeing very nearly everywhere is a big gender pay gap, and BMB has decided to actively close that in the next few years. So I was wondering, and this is a question I have for Amanda, is do you feel that this is something that companies should proactively do to address this issue? Do you also see this in the UK, or maybe also Sue, because it might be different in different countries? Obviously, I'm based in Austria and we have other regulations.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a really important thing for companies to do. And certainly, I mean, we had the gender pay gap report that the government brought in when Theresa May was the Prime Minister. I think that's been suspended right now. I think when I was attending the Gender Balance summit back in March, they talked about the fact that the pay report had been suspended and they were trying to bring it back. And I would really, push for that to be brought back, because I think it's really important that women's salaries are, that women are viewed with as much importance as men. Mm-hmm. And you touched on quotas there, and RSA is part of the 30% club, which has been aimed to get at least 30% of women onto the board. And I think with that initiative, many of the sort of bigger companies in the UK have managed to achieve that. So yeah, the idea of quotas certainly seems to be working. I'm not sure it's necessarily worked at the sort of middle management level. It'd be nice to see some quotas further down the management level, but yeah, having those targets for companies to work towards, I think, is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's as you say, you need that succession planning, don't you? If there's a gap in the middle, it's fine to say there's a 30%. So the only way women could get in is if they were coming from another organisation where they did support them all the way through. Definitely. I mean, just going back to that gender pay gap report, I think it's great that it put it on the agenda at the boards. So every company over a certain size had to submit that, and the CEO had to sign it. So I think, for raising awareness and putting it on the agenda, that's great. I agree with the point that Ronke and Ursula were making, which is, if it's a case of, do we discuss profits and commercials versus discussing inclusion and equality and gender and things, quite often it does get pushed down the agenda, if not scratched off, and I think that's a mistake that people are making, but I think it happens. And I also get a bit concerned when you read the gender pay gap reports, or when you did read them, that they were almost just a blanket copy and paste that this won't work. So there's an element of, there's got to be buy-in, as you say, from senior management, and there's also got to be buy-in from your colleagues. That cultural acceptance that this is not people complaining. This is the reality, and this is what needs to change, and why it's a good thing to change. So perhaps Ursula, you would like to raise some points about what strategies you might have seen in terms of improving the gender balance.
Yes, I mean, we are actually right now at the beginning of our bigger journey, and we are still discussing about quotas. So this is yeah, as I said, so this is one big issue that we do not decide to go for it right now. But what we do, or how we try to make it stay on the agenda, of the top level management, is that we discuss it together with employee experience. So we, as a big company, and I think many companies will have the problem with, big baby boomer generation will go into their retirement, and all this stuff, leads to, okay, we need to take care for our employees, and how can we take care of our employees if we try to make the workplace better, that they feel inclusive and whatsoever, and I think this is the whole story more or less about, we need, and we need to make women stay, so what we saw is that especially in the leadership, on the leadership level, that women left our company, and more women left our company than they, for example, changed their job within the company. So there is a problem, with leadership and women in our company. And what we do is right now we started to make a women's circle. And to get, to get to know the problems, we will start to make exit interviews and surveys to know why they are leaving us. And of course, we have a big focus on this family topic, as it is. I mean, we have around 30% of our female employees are mothers, so it's a big internal job market, so to say. So many people or many women who can be attracted for skill development, for example, after they're coming back from maternity leave. And there's a lot to do there. And these family topics, and this is the nice thing about it, that includes the men as well. So they can, they really see the profit. When we talk about part-time, then they have more time for their children and so on. So this is what we start to co-create with them.
Brilliant. So, sorry, Ronke, go on.
I wanted to add to what Ursula was saying, because while she was talking, I remembered that I recently read this Equality in Tech report that DICE put out. And I think one of the things we have to remind management is that it's actually important to include, a diversity and inclusion strategy that actually works, because what people are seeing now, and what they also find in the survey, is that people actually check the image of a company around these issues. So they will actively find out whether this company is really diverse and if they will feel good there before they actually decide to take a job, which means that if you really want to get the best people, you will have to work on your image, which means that you have to actually actively change stuff in the company, because people will not join your company. I know a couple of companies I definitely wouldn't join just because I know that the atmosphere there is just not good. So there are a lot of great, and it's not just women. I think that's the important point to make here. It's also male talent that nowadays the younger men are actually more concerned with diversity, maybe not just female diversity, because diversity has many facets, but they are actually concerned with the image of the company before they join. So this might be a strategy that we could have to make companies close the gender pay gap. And there was another thing I wanted to touch on, and that was equity, because our diversity and inclusion strategy has been renamed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, because one of the great problems with this whole discussion around diversity is, even if we manage to hire women, and some bigger companies with a better image would actually be able to do that, there's a retention problem that what Ursula also touched on, that women are leaving. And the reason they are leaving is that just hiring women is not enough. When you hire women, you have to give them the workspace and the tools to actually be successful and feel they're appreciated, because if not, they will leave. So equity is a very important thing. And a lot of stuff that Ursula mentioned, what they're doing is around equity, giving people the tools to do their job as best as they can, which might not be the same thing that a man needs. It might be more flexible hours. It might be, I don't know, less hours. It might be, I don't know, a kindergarten in your company if it's big enough. There are so many things that could work as a tool to make your life easier. So this, I think, is a big thing that could make the gender gap close, equity, giving people what they need to work.
Yeah. I mean, so just picking up on that, people leaving, not feeling supported. What sort of support strategies have you seen work, Amanda, or that you are in place at RSA that really help people to feel part of things?
I think we've certainly got a big focus on flexibility. And in fact, it was interesting what you said, Ronke, because when I got this job at RSA, I had 3 interviews. And I did deliberately ask the question. I was open and honest that I've got a family. I need to get a work-life balance. I will give 100% to my job, but I've got a family as well. And there was one tech company that I applied to, and I got quite a. The response wasn't very nice. It kind of basically said there wasn't a place for me there, and it was quite sad really. But then when I went and I had my interview at RSA, I met my boss and two of my colleagues, and I asked about having a family, and they're like, yeah, we've got flexible working. We're set up. This is what we're set up for. And I was like, oh, right, okay. So it was a no-brainer that I was going to join RSA, and I have felt, and we do have a huge focus on flexibility. We have, I've got a friend coming back to work after just having had a baby, and interesting enough, her baby's 7 months old. Her husband's now going to take paternity leave. She's coming back and she's going to squish her week into four long days. So, it's not difficult for companies to make they're small changes, but they will change people's lives immeasurably. So I think you're quite right. If you want to retain top talent, you need to give employees what they need, especially if they're working parents. And I was going to say that in terms of supporting women at work, I think things like mentoring and coaching and networking are really important. So we've got this, what we call a step forward program for a certain level of women. They're sort of level 4. So women at a certain level that we want to progress through to the next level of sort of management or leadership, whereby we set up mentoring for them. I'm setting up a women in STEM group at the moment to try and have a networking community for women in my area and in IT, to support them in their growth. I think coaching is also really, really key, if that's possible. We've also got a series of personal development workshops, where we might teach women to be more confident. It'd be great if society would change and companies would change, and therefore they're looking for those competent women, but maybe we have to accept right now that there is still this thought that you have to be confident. So let's try and help women be confident. So let's support them moving forwards.
Mm-hmm. It might be worth actually just to put some context around that. So what's the size of RSA? Because there's a lot of organizations that are thinking, if I had a STEM group, if I established it, there'd probably only be 3 of us in it. So what's the size of RSA?
Yeah, we are a really big company. Now you're going to catch me off guard, because I suppose, and we are a multinational company as well. So I suppose what I am mainly talking about the UK part of the company, but we are multinational. We're several thousand, and we have a huge number of employees. So we are a really big corporate organisation. So I imagine it's much more difficult for smaller companies to have quite this many initiatives going.
Yeah, true.
But I suppose, the mentorship that you talked about, bits of personal development can be inclusive. It can be open to everybody. Those sorts of things you can still do. It's just in terms of network. I suppose you've then got to pool resource with, I don't know, I'm just thinking out of the box here. If I was a small tech company in Manchester, I'd probably want to be part of the tech meetups, like I am actually. I encourage my team to go to all the tech meetups, and I would probably encourage a smaller team to do that and to reach out, because that's when you discover that there are other people like you in the industry, even if they're not in your team, even if they're not in your direct report.
And I think it doesn't just have to be women, and I don't think it should just be women either. So I think getting men on board is really important, because we're not going to change anything if it's just women. We need the men to help us. And you're quite right, reaching out to having network. Certainly we have had mentoring schemes. We've worked across companies as well. So it doesn't just have to be within your company.
That's a very good point. Thank you. Ronke, did you have a point?
Yeah, I wanted to add to the mentoring thing. I am a big fan of mentoring, but what I also realized previously is that you actually need a sponsor, because mentoring is fine and you can, go into conversation, share your knowledge and whatever. But what you actually need is also, and this is usually men, a sponsor within the company who will then actually say your name when there's a job opening, because as great as mentoring is for your personal growth, for progression in the company, it's usually a sponsor that will give you, the leg up. So this is something that people need to keep in mind. I also recommend everyone that they should get a mentor nowadays, but I also try to emphasize to look for sponsors. That can be female sponsors if you have enough women at the higher level, but male sponsorship is so important as long as we have this disparity of genders, and especially in the upper management, because I read somewhere recently, you need friends who will say your name in a room full of opportunities. And that's what you need. You need someone to say your name when there's an opportunity, and that's a sponsor.
So, yeah, good point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in my experience, I always think of it as building advocates. People, like you say, that every time a project is mentioned, they will quote you as being the one that was pivotal to making it happen. And you can build as many of those as you like as well. It's getting that visibility, isn't it? And this comes back to this confidence thing. We naturally don't big up our skills. We don't stand there and say, I came up with this solution that I'm presenting to you now. It's kind of obvious that everybody's thinking it was a team effort, or you're giving other people credit for things that you've worked incredibly hard for. And it's having that confidence to sell your competence, I suppose, isn't it, on that big stage?
Again, I want to interject here because I recently tried something and I went to one of those I Am Remarkable workshops. Yes. So this is a very big topic actually that Google is sponsoring. So they have these workshops where they try to teach women and underrepresented groups, that is a difficult word, to actually stand up and talk about their successes and achievements, because that's really hard for a lot of women, just as Sue just said. And I actually now registered to become a trainer for these workshops, because I feel this is so valuable, teaching women to actually take credit for their success and stand there and say, okay, I did this. Yeah. Because it's really hard. I mean, there's one thing is being a woman, then there's all this cultural context. I actually wrote a small article around it, because I was brought up not to talk about achievements. It's bragging, and that's bad, so you have this dual problem talking about your success and your achievements. So this is something this is something that you can actually address through mentorship, because a mentor can also be someone who's not actually in your company. I think it's about someone who can tell you what's actually important when you try to achieve something. But good point, Sue.
Yeah, in fact, just picking up on that a bit again, the book that I was referring to earlier, The Con Job, by Suzanne Doyle Morris, she talks in there about 360 reviews being incredibly valuable, and how these 360 reviews were coming back and they were saying that they thought these women were underconfident. They weren't very confident, basically. Whereas the women who'd then scored themselves actually rated themselves as more confident, than other people perceived them to be, which also sort of makes you think, well, outwardly I'm not being perceived as confident, but inwardly I know I'm competent and confident in my own abilities. So this I Am Remarkable, I suppose, is building this inner strength to help show it on the outside a little bit more, and share it with the world, so that they perceive it. But it's very interesting, they said, that the study between the 360 feedback for men and the 360 feedback for women found that people just didn't recognize it the same in women. And it is that bragging thing, isn't it? We don't do that. Brilliant. Amanda, are there any other strategies that you would say, have been so remarkable at RSA that you really want to share with us today?
I think for me, and this is probably we'll maybe come back to this at the end, but I think RSA has given me the freedom to go and talk to the women coders of tomorrow. So I've been allowed to go and do Code Club. In fact, and going back to something you said earlier, Ursula, about bringing coding to the girls, when we started out with Code Club, we built a project to code a series of LED lights. So I wish I brought them because they're really cool and funky. But at one point, the whole of the actuarial pricing team we gave them out at Christmas, and in their spare time, they're all coding these lights and coming up with really cool patterns. So my boss and the team, mostly men as well, really supported me. So they were sort of championing me. Also, they've allowed me to go and speak. I spoke at Queen Mary University of London, which is a very sort of diverse university. Many women there, many people of color. So I've gone and spoken about data science careers there and spoken at local colleges as well. So it's been great to have the freedom to do that, and actually get blessing from my employers to go and role model and to build a pipeline of female talent. I think it's really important that we do that.
It's getting a leader, isn't it, to see that indirect benefit?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, my company probably won't end up employing these people that I'm training or teaching, but they can still see the greater good.
And it's lovely to see that. Sorry, Ursula.
No, I just wanted to support this. Yeah, so so I think if the company and our company does that as well, to give us the freedom to work on this topic, and to invest this time, and to, as I said, co-create solutions together, with the people who are actually affected by different moments they have during their work journey. And as a second point is really kind of how to say that, a small thing, but maybe hopefully will have a big impact, is what I told you before, was that we opened up our job application to part-time employees, so from leadership to whatever. So all job profiles are open for that, and I really hope that this is a good measure at the end, but we will see it next year or in the next 3 years if this has really the wished effect on the shares, on the women shares.
Yeah. Well, we're almost out of time, so I think it's time for our final takeaways, ladies. So Amanda, as you're our guest, what final takeaway would you like to leave our listeners and watchers with today?
Yeah, I would just say get out there and role model, and let's show girls and that they have a place in technology.
Thank you. Brilliant. Ronke?
Yes, I would have said the exact same thing. I think it's up to every one of us actually to go out there, speak to women, show what we're doing, and just, get that picture out into their heads that this is something they can do. And what I also try to do is to show that it's actually fun to do. I think that's very important, to show that we have this passion, we have this fun, and then we have this flexibility. And I think we should also talk about the money we make, because that's also a thing. In IT, you make a lot of money, and you have not only a flexible work-life balance, you also have a very good economic financial stability. Things that to think about and tell people about, I think.
Yes, that's true. Yes, my last words. I would say let's speak openly about what are your experiences, and try to find your group and your peer group, and to co-create together with them the solutions, and then bring it to the management.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to just pick up on Ronke's point, because it's quite a big one. You talked about it being quite, you've got the potential in IT, haven't we, to earn a lot of money compared with other sectors, especially, when you consider some of the other roles. So I think there's also the prospect that in a lot of households where a woman in the family has gone into IT or tech or data, whatever you want to call it, they are potentially the breadwinner in the family, just by the nature of the fact that we can earn so much in this sector. But consequently, that means that companies need to embrace women or risk losing them, because the woman might be the breadwinner, but also might have other needs. And I think that's incredibly important to remember, is just because you have male workers and female workers, it doesn't mean that the female workers are any less important because they have a family or because they are female. They are equally as valuable and competent as your male colleagues, and therefore not to assume that they are not the breadwinner in their family, just the same as you might do of a man. And I think that's something that Suzanne and I talked about last week, the author of this book, because she came across that a lot. You could be the breadwinner, but you weren't being treated as your male colleagues were, who are also breadwinners, because it wasn't viewed that you would be the breadwinner. That was quite interesting. I think there's been some fantastic recommendations and strategies for people to take forward. And I hope you will feel brave enough to start to embark on these conversations with your manager, with your colleagues. And you'll probably realize that people like you agree that they want a more diverse workforce. They want the opportunity to go into leadership where their diversity to them means they didn't go to a traditional university. They didn't do university at all. Perhaps they fall into another category of being what I call the non-status quo. And that's what we need to drive and challenge. So hopefully you've enjoyed this session. So thank you to everybody again this evening. It's been fantastic talking with you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
And we will see you again next month for another Choose to Challenge panel discussion. Thanks, Amanda, to our guests.